total market supply is interesting to think about in a perfectly competitive world as well. And total market supply depends on the number of firms in the industry. Recall from the discussion on supply curves earlier in the semester that industry supply is the sum of all firms' individual supply curves. So an individual firm supplies where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, but they're all very small firms in very large industries when we think about perfect competition. And industry supply is the sum of what all firms individually decide to do. Now, when we think about market supply, we're going to make a few simple assumptions to make the discussion a little bit more tractable. The first is that existing firms and potential entrants have the same costs, that there's not a cost difference from one firm to another. All firms have the same costs of production. The second one is that firms' costs don't change as other firms enter or exit an industry. And then finally, we'll assume that the number of firms in the market is fixed in the short run, but variable in the long run. That is, in the short run, each firm is operating on its short-run supply curve, and if market conditions change, notably if the demand for the product changes, then each firm will operate on its short-run supply curve in the short run, and then firms will decide to enter and exit in the long run. So the number of firms is variable in the long run. Firms will enter or exit whenever economic profits are somehow different than zero. So if economic profits are greater than zero, firms will have an incentive to enter the industry. But if profits are less than zero, firms will have an incentive to exit the industry. Now, this is important. It's important to remember that zero economic profits in economics is not equal to zero accounting profits. Sometimes students become confused and they'll assume that, well, if I only make $1 in profits, then that's not really worth it for me to enter the industry. But that's not true. $1 in economic profits is precisely the point where it becomes worth entering the industry. That's exactly what we mean when we talk about economic profit. Economic profit is positive if this choice is better than the next best alternative. So even $1 in economic profits, not accounting profits, but $1 in economic profits should be enough to encourage firms to enter the industry. That's the point precisely where it makes it the best choice to enter. So here's an example. We consider a market with 100 firms, and we look at the graph on the left, and the graph on the left represents the market, and the graph on the right represents the firm. So firms are price takers. So essentially they all face the price P star and can sell as much or as little as they want of output at the going rate P star. And so we begin with a market in equilibrium. At price P star, each firm in the industry will produce 25 units. We can see this from the graph on the right. From the graph on the left, we know that there are 100 firms, so together they're producing a total of 2,500 units. So industry output has 100 firms producing 25 units each for a grand total in the market of $2,500. Now, you can think about it. It's useful to think about this for a second. If one firm adjusts its output a little bit, say they go from selling 25 to 26 or from 25 to 23 or something like that, that's not going to move P star very much at all. They're such a small fish that their individual decisions have no effect on the market price. This is an assumption about a perfectly competitive industry, but we'll relax that when we think about other kinds of industrial organization a little bit later in the semester. What this means then is that the firm's demand curve and its marginal revenue curve are the same. The demand curve that faces the firm is a horizontal line at a price equal to P star. This is not the same as the market demand curve, which is downward sloping. We expect that lower prices will induce more customers in the market. But each firm is so small that they perceive the demand curve that faces them as a horizontal line equal to the price P star. So then what happens if market demand changes? Suppose that there's something that increases consumer demand in this market and we get a shift in the demand curve from D to D prime. If this is the case, and in the short run we can see that firms will all decide to supply higher levels of output. If we look at the graph on the right, we can see that the firm now wants to supply 35 units instead of 25 at the new higher price P prime. Each firm will produce where price equals marginal cost. And when the price rises, they can move farther up their marginal cost curve or farther up their supply curve. So then each firm will increase its output from 25 units to 35 units. In the market, then, the total output will go from 2,500 units to 3,500 units in the short run. Our assumption was that we have 100 firms in the short run, and each firm will increase its output from 25 to 35. So total output in the market increases by 1,000 units from 2,500 to 3,500. So this is what happens to price and quantity supplied in the short run. Now, in the long run, remember that firms now have an incentive to enter the market. Price exceeds the minimum of average variable cost, so these firms are earning profits. These competitive firms are earning positive economic profits. And when this is the case, this provides a signal to other firms to enter the industry. And firms will continue to enter the industry all the way until the supply curve reaches S prime, all the way until the price has fallen all the way back down to P stars. So at this higher price P prime, firms will have an incentive to enter the industry, and will do so until they push the price all the way back down to P star, where we return to equilibrium, and there's no incentive for firms to enter anymore. At our new equilibrium, when demand shifts out to D prime, at our new equilibrium, we can see that we've got 4,000 units to be produced, and each firm at the low price is producing 25 units. So what this implies is that 60 new firms will have entered the industry, bringing us to a total of 160 firms to produce the 4,000 units that the market is consuming. In the long run, thus, in our industry, the market supply curve is horizontal. The market supply curve is a horizontal line at P star in the long run. The long run market supply curve, then, will always have this tendency to return back to the place where firms are producing at the minimum of average total cost. So with our beginning assumptions, then, entry and exit always bring prices back in line with the firm's efficient scale. Note that entry and exit will occur as long as the next potential entrant believes that they can earn positive economic profits. And so with identical firms facing identical costs, entry and exit will occur and tend to always bring us back towards P star with the assumptions that we've made about firms. The assumptions that we made about all firms and entrants having the same costs and these costs not changing with entry and exit don't always hold. And we won't do a graphical explanation here, but we'll try and explain it with words. The first one is that the industry supply curve may slope upward if older firms have a cost advantage. That is, if the firms in the industry have been doing it for so long that they're more efficient, that they can do it more cheaply than any new entrant who might consider entering the industry. If older firms have a cost advantage, then new firms come in with higher average cost curves, and so the entry will not continue to occur up until they reach the P star of existing firms, but it will occur up until they reach the minimum average cost of the marginal firm, of the next potential entrant. And if that's higher, then the price won't have a tendency to fall all the way back to P star. The industry supply curve may slope up also if more firms mean that there's more competition for good employees and good locations, and so as the size of the industry increases, they have to bid up the prices of their resources that they're using, and this means more entrants will increase the costs of existing firms potentially and entrants for sure. The industry supply curve may, in fact, actually slope down in certain instances if new firms might have a cost advantage. If new firms can take advantage of greater technological enhancements or efficiencies or something like that, they may be able to produce at a cost advantage. It may slope down also if technological spillovers increase with industry size. That is, as the industry gets larger, firms can learn from each other, and the more activity in the industry, the more firms learn, the more they can compete to drive down their costs. And so it might be the case that larger industries breed technological innovations that could produce lower prices in the long run as industries increase. You can think about this an awful lot in the market for technology. For cell phones become cheaper, computers become cheaper, all sorts of things become cheaper as the market grows and as firms learn more from how to do things from watching their competitors. Now we might think about the efficiency of competitive markets and note that competitive markets have some very, very nice efficiency properties. The first one is that they produce at the efficient scale for firms. There are equilibrating tendencies to push firms to produce at the lowest per unit cost. So they produce at the efficient scale. They also provide the efficient level of output in the market. Firms in a perfectly competitive industry set price equal to marginal cost. They produce at the spot where price equals marginal cost. And the price is a point on our demand curve that represents the marginal benefit for consumers. And when they produce up to the point where marginal benefit equals marginal cost, then we're maximizing consumer and producer surplus. We're getting the highest amount of welfare that we can in this particular market. The marginal value of consumers is equal to the marginal cost of producers, and so we're not only achieving efficiency at the firm level, we're also achieving efficiency at the market level.